Throughout the course of the 2023-24 season, the Edmonton Oilers have been one of two things: an NHL team underperforming to an embarrassing degree, or a completely unstoppable force. The obvious turning point from the former to the latter was when Kris Knoblauch took over as head coach. However, they have still had their struggles in these past 4 months. The Oilers have been one of, if not the best, team in the NHL in the time since Knoblauch took over the bench. But they're not perfect, and despite how good they've been, there are questions about how this roster is built and how the team may perform when it matters most. Today, we explore whether or not the Oilers are ready for this to be their year, because while we know they have the top-end talent to win, the question is if they have enough to win it all. Let's flash back to November 10th, 2023. It's exactly 1 month into the NHL season. Most teams have played enough games to figure out what the rest of their season is going to look like. The San Jose Sharks are being talked about as possibly one of the worst teams in NHL history. And, equal with them on points, are the Edmonton Oilers. 2 days later, Edmonton coach Jay Woodcroft is fired. Kris Knoblauch takes over, and the Oilers begin to go on a tear. Over 50 games later, the Oilers are pretty comfortably etched into a playoff spot. Their 16-game win streak went a long way in recovering for their abysmal start to the season. There's room for their exact position to shift around, but almost no chance of them missing out on the postseason, which is incredible given how they'd started. Despite the criticisms of Oilers management, they obviously understand the position that they're in, with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in their prime years, among their other star players. So, given that they've recovered the season to being at minimum a playoff team, they spent at the deadline, and decided to trade away their first-round pick. Their decision to move their first is absolutely correct. It's who they spent it on that may be a concern and opens us up to discussion about the problems with Edmonton's management as a whole. Despite having assets at the deadline, like their next 3 first-round picks, and expendable players with some value like Philip Broberg or Dylan Holloway, they didn't have the cap space they could have had to pull off a major move. They didn't have the space if they wanted to easily bring in one of the top few guys on the block, and that problem is entirely a creation of Ken Holland and the Oilers management. If not for some of the decisions that Holland has made, the Oilers could have a legitimate dynasty-level roster. If that sounds dramatic, consider this. Connor McDavid is signed below market value. He makes $12.5 million per year, and could easily be making in the range of at least 14 or 15. Leon Draisaitl makes $8.5. He could easily be making 12 or 13. Zach Hyman, Evan Bouchard, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins make a combined total of about $14 million. If they were all to be signed today, it's within reason that the sum of their 3 contracts would be $10 million more. All 5 of the Edmonton Oilers' top scorers are signed below market value, some significantly so. But then, they're weighed down by moves like the signing of Jack Campbell, Cody Ceci, or the overpayment of Darnell Nurse. They're limited by these deals when the core is set up to absolute perfection, in at minimum this year and the next. But unfortunately, past mistakes limit their present and future options, and so they ended up with Adam Henrique. Adam Henrique is absolutely not a bad player. The Oilers are getting him at a cap hit of less than $1.5 million, and also added Sam Carrick in the deal for less than league minimum. But it's not the home run deal they could have been able to get had their situation been different. They also added Troy Stecher later on deadline day to shore up their defensive depth, but the focus for them was clearly on offense, as it has been in Edmonton for much of their recent history. And if their plan is to blow away teams with incredible offensive potency, well, it's pretty hard to doubt that approach when you see how electric they've been this year. Connor McDavid is in the MVP race, while Leon Draisaitl is one of the most dangerous dual threats in the NHL. No surprises there. Despite being so incredibly critical to the success of the Oilers, McDavid and Draisaitl are so excellent and dependable that we really don't even need to talk about them. So how about Edmonton's surprise leading goal scorer, Zach Hyman? Each and every year, Hyman has grown more into his role in Edmonton. When he'd first signed there were questions about whether he could be a top 6 forward. Over his 2.5+ seasons, Hyman has proven to be able to hang with Edmonton's other stars, and has become one of the greatest net front presences in the NHL today. It looks like he's going to score over 50 goals this season, likely to end with a total that destroys the career high he'd set only last season, a mark he's well past already. Hyman's style has and should continue to translate well to the playoffs. If he, McDavid, and Draisaitl can get back to the playoff production they put up in 2021-22, the Oilers are set to make another deep run. The Edmonton Oilers have been very offensively oriented throughout much of the McDavid era, and because of that perception is still there. For much of those recent years, that offensive dynamism has went along with a weak defense, but that's no longer the case. This year, the Oilers are stronger defensively than ever before, and much of that is thanks to Evan Bouchard. Evan Bouchard is the most significant influence on the Oilers' back end. This year, Bouchard gets more time on ice than any other Oiler, the first season in which that's been the case. And that's very well deserved. Bouchard is an offensive force, rivaling players like Victor Hedman, Roman Josi, and Noah Dobson in defenseman scoring. But he's been extremely strong on the defensive end this year also. This is proven by his individual analytics, but also how strong the Oilers as a whole have been defensively with Bouchard as their 1D. The Oilers are top 10 in the NHL in goals allowed this season. Considering they haven't gotten consistently excellent goaltending at any point this season, it's indicative that they've got a strong defensive system, especially considering how good their numbers are post-Woodcroft. This is also backed by more advanced stats. MoneyPuck has the Oilers comfortably in the top 3 in the NHL in all situations in expected goals against. Their overall expected goals percentage is also top 3. This defensive foundation is built off of the performances of Evan Bouchard, along with his frequent defense partner Mattias Ekholm. The Edmonton Oilers display an incredible defensive system to go along with nearly unrivaled offensive firepower, the combination of which makes them extremely dangerous for any team on any given night in the NHL. There are concerns about the Edmonton Oilers. The goaltending probably isn't as strong as you would want it to be for a championship contender, but despite that, they're still winning. Their roster may be constructed poorly in some fashions, but in others it's fantastic, and it's good enough for them to keep winning. Since Kris Knoblauch took over as head coach, the Oilers have been borderline the best team in the NHL, judging by the points they've earned in the standings. They're at least good at everything, and great at most things. It's hard to believe this is the same season in which a coach got fired, and fans were calling for every executive's head. But, in the past few months, Connor McDavid has been a two-way superstar. Draisaitl, Hyman, and Bouchard have played at superstar levels also. Teams can't stop them from scoring and have trouble scoring on them as well. If Knoblauch's Oilers can continue the form they've been on now into the postseason, it's going to be extremely difficult to defeat them. They've been doing it for long enough now. The Edmonton Oilers are legit. They are maybe the biggest threat to contending teams across the Western Conference. This is the best chance the Edmonton Oilers have had with Connor McDavid to win a Stanley Cup, and anything short of that lofty goal will go down as a failure.